People would tell us to get a grin. Yeah, I would, just to see all my friends.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Let's take our seats and prepare for the final session of this afternoon. Once we've done with this, then we can all head off and have our tea or our beer or our wine and a little bit of a feet-up scenario. So please, take your seats and we can move on with the rest of the afternoon's agenda. If you can hear me outside the door, please do join us. I'll let you settle down for a couple of minutes before inviting our next speaker to come up, just so have a little bit of a respect for the keynote address. Okay, folks, so the final leg of today's activities will involve a final panel on financing, some wrap-up words from our ADB organizing committee, and we'll kick off this final session with the last keynote address of the afternoon, and of the day indeed. The opening remarks for this session will be given by Mr. Andreas de Pipatria, Head of Communication Bureau at the Coordinating Ministry of Maritime and Investment Affairs at the Republic of Indonesia. Pak Andreas, please join us.
Thank you very much. This is the big challenge for the last session. Yeah, I hope we have enough energy to finish our session in this afternoon. Okay, Excellencies, the official from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, and representative from ADB, representative from IMT-GT Triangle, honorable guests, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Very good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It is indeed a great honor to be able to join this very important event. On this occasion, I would like to complement today's fruitful discussion by providing some perspective on why and how we should responsibly utilize marine space, especially in relation to the blue economy and investment opportunities area. Ladies and gentlemen, globally, the ocean covers two-thirds of our space, yet its effective management still needs improvement. Oceans are vital for Indonesian economy and welfare, within more than 7,000 islands and about 100,000 kilometers of coastline, and three-quarters of its territory at sea. Oceans are the central to Indonesian prosperity. Yet there are challenges to the extent and integrity of Indonesian marine and coastal ecosystem, which threaten its economic value, starting from the overfishing, degradation of mangrove and coral reef, and marine debris. This challenge can be addressed through a blue economy or a sustainable ocean economy strategy. A blue economy creates healthy ocean, resilient coastal livelihood, and sustainable economic growth. The ocean economy consists of many industry sectors that are dependent on ocean resources, including fisheries and aquaculture, maritime transport, port shipping and shipbuilding, coastal and maritime tourism, extraction of mineral, oil and gas, generation of alternative energy, such as wind, wave, and tidal energy, marine biotechnology and water desalination, and waste disposal. The ocean also acts as the platform for the carbon sequestration as a natural carbon capture mechanism by coral reef, seaweed, seagrass, and mangrove. Therefore, human use of the ocean are intensifying. There are new and increased stresses on the ocean ecosystem and people. Development pressure in coastal waters for aquaculture, tourism, and renewable energy creates spatial conflict. And there are challenges in both small-scale and industrial marine resource to the balance resource extraction with resource protection. The cumulative effect of the human activities in the ocean, combined with the climate change impact, point to ongoing and new threats on the ocean help from the high tide line to the high seas. Existing management systems are usually insufficient to address the complexity of the issues facing the ocean today, or to integrate management across multiple sectors for the next 10 or 20 years. New management framework and government structure are essential for ensuring the coastal communities and nations will continue to reap long-term benefit and services that healthy ocean can provide. To this end, marine spatial planning provide government, local communities, and marine sector with transparent, equitable, and participatory process to navigate this important challenge, develop effective and durable solutions, and plan for the future. This tool helps us to utilize our marine space responsibly. For the sake of worldwide benefit, many global leaders have put their attention to the ocean economy. The new paradigm emphasizes the sustainable, resilient, and inclusive with the use, governance, management, and conservation of the ecosystem to support economic growth across various sectors. The blue economy concept provides a holistic vision that embraces economic growth when it's sustainable and doesn't damage other sectors. The concept is very relevant today because only responsible business can sustainably achieve growth. Returning to the basic principle that a business exists when society needs it and no one wants to be harmed, cheated, or manipulated, the relationship in business should be a mutually beneficial one. If we then escalate such thinking to the relationship between the people and the planet, we will realize the urgency of the maintaining harmony between the ecology, economy, and society. Ladies and gentlemen, following the initiative, let me share what we have been prepared in Indonesia. In our 2045 Blue Economy Vision, it is the basis for utilizing marine resources. Indonesia has acknowledged the value of the blue economy as its main reference in achieving sustainable ocean for the greatest prosperity of the people. For example, in the fisheries sector, we aim to enhance fisheries sustainability by shifting from the current mix about 55% capture and 45% aquaculture to 38% capture and 62% aquaculture by 2045. Of course, balancing the maintaining harmony is not easy task. On one side, to boost the achievement of the vision, we might need to invite both domestic and international potential investor, corporation, cooperative, and joint venture with a higher capacity to absorb this compared to the local community are encouraged to participate. On the other side, local aquaculture has also become our main concern, as fisheries production should support community development. Having this in mind, fishing in Indonesia will guide by a zoning system categorized into commercial and non-commercial, with fishing business actors from industry, traditional, and local fishermen group. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, we see the growth, sustainability, and inclusiveness are actually determined by ourselves. To reap optimal benefit from the ocean economy, we need to first invest our effort in collaboratively preparing a conducive environmental platform for the ocean economy to grow. I would like to invite all parties to lower our egos and look at the bigger picture, the potential benefit of the ocean economy that prevails globally across sector and over generation. It is my fervent hope that several ongoing initiatives in Indonesia can provide insight into the development of wider scale policies and action. On the other side, we also invite all stakeholder participation and suggestion to fine-tune up and scale up those initiatives, especially with regard to the blue economy development in Indonesia. I do look forward to working together with corporation, investor, and institution if there is anything we can collaborate on. Thank you very much.
Like Andreas, thank you very much indeed for those comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we've learned today the ocean offers an enormous potential for us to battle some of the major problems that we face. It just needs to be brought into partnership. We have the technology to be able to do that. We have the scientific and the moral imperative to be able to do that. We even have a lot of political backing to be able to do that. So the one thing that remains is the finance. How do we get the finance to help us do that? Our next panel is going to consider that very question. Let me invite the panelists to the stage. Ms. Alex Burrell is Principal Investment Specialist at the Private Sector Operations Department of the ADB. Alex, please join us. Mr. Jesse Russell Gage Culver, Managing Partner and Co-Founder of the Net Zero Fund. Ms. Joan Fulton, COO of Ocean Assets. Mr. Michael Dethelson, Chief Innovative Finance and International Financial Institutions Division of UNIDO. Mr. Vincent Choi, Asia Representative at Delphos. And in order to ask the questions and direct the panel this afternoon, we have Guylaine de Vallon, who's the lead at the Blue SEA Finance Hub of the ADB. Guylaine, please.
Thank you, Timur. SEA stands for Southeast Asia. Good afternoon. Yeah, Len, please join us. Len. We cannot do this without you. We are missing one.
Apologies, you got to move from the morning to the afternoon session. Sorry for forgetting to introduce you. Guylaine, please do the honors.
Oh, this is Len George. Please come in. I will take the steps after you. So everything is in order. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for these introductions. My name is Guylaine from ADB headquarters in Manila. So I have been handed the task, the very risky task by Steve and the committee to moderate this last panel. You know, the panel just before the drinks on the dinner. Are you still with me? Yeah. But you know, the reconforting thought is that this panel will last probably 3 hours. So that's okay, we have time to debate. Are you still with me? You still are with me, okay. No, the very good thought is that we have gathered here a very, very talented and skilled array of panelists, the same quality as the former panel this morning and this afternoon, that I will be very happy to introduce to you. And we will do a very short presentation of their work. I think we have a constraint of time, so maybe we'll only have 1 or 2 rounds of questions from my end. So this morning, we have seen how the new and renewable energy in ocean could be integrated in the global energy needs. This afternoon, we have seen how we could integrate SMEs into this new renewable energy world in terms of financing as well. We just touched upon financing. Now we are talking about finance. How can we finance all of those projects, small scale, bigger scale, and who are the players to do that? Let me one by one introduce here my panelists, starting with Len. So Len George. Len is a Principal Energy Specialist at ADB in the Pacific Regional Department, PARD. He currently focuses on ADB energy sector to the region, including expanding the adoption of clean energy, utility performance improvement, and support for energy sector reforms. Before that, he was doing some project in South Asia that I think he will talk about in renewable energy development, covering gigawatt solar power parks in India or also in Maldives, but also cross-border power interconnections and helping access to electricity for last mile. So Len, I was thinking that maybe you could give us some kind of insight as to what you think the challenges are in the first place for energy in small island states in terms of financial, regulatory, but also technical aspects. starting with sovereign support, but also expanding on private sector aspects. Could you also share with us the learnings that I just mentioned about the solar parks, the huge solar parks that you did on terrestrial areas in India, in terms of enabling conditions? Again, policy framework, staging of investments to bring private sector or capital at scale. I leave you with those questions. Thank you, Len.
Thank you, Gile. Hello, everyone. I'm Len. I'm part of the Pacific operations. So what that means is I cover part of a region that starts from the Marshall Islands, the FSM, Palau, all the way down south to Fiji and Cook Islands and Tonga. We have about 14 countries in the Pacific department at ADB. And what's interesting is of the 16 small island development states, or as Rear Admiral says, large ocean states, 14 of the 16 are in the region that we cover. Most of these are also fragile and conflict-affected states, which means ADB deals with them in a different way that we would compared to some of the larger countries that we operate in. Now, what's special about these countries? Most of them, again, have a very high cost of electricity, 80% or more diesel-powered. A few countries in this region, Fiji and PNG, for example, Solomon, will have some hydro, but a lot of them are run on diesel, and you see significant volatility in fuel prices. So if you look at fuel prices in 2020 and fuel prices in 2022, there's probably been about 250% increase that utilities and consumers have to deal with in these places. A third point is about the vision. And so you have governments in these countries coming out with very ambitious targets on decarbonizing, targets for 100% renewables, targets for decarbonizing the transport sector, energy efficiency. A lot of these appear to be simple to achieve, particularly if you're coming in from ADB and say, well, you have a huge checkbook and let's make this happen. But like I said, this is deceptively simple. When you go in and you start working with small grids, some of the technological challenges that you deal with intermittent solar and wind are at a scale that you would not see in larger continental grids. And having the requisite engineering skills and ability to deal with that is a big challenge. There's also the issue of, there's a bit of a cognitive dissonance when you look at pricing. A lot of times they get approached by the private sector, with deals to, well, if you're paying 40 cents for diesel, how about 38 cents for a technology that we're going to introduce here? And can you sign the PPA? So that tends to be, something that happens probably every couple of months in some of the smaller island countries. So you'd see a variance of, utility scale, rooftop solar, floating solar, micro hydro, mini hydro, all kinds of technologies coming in, green hydrogen, different forms of hydrogen. And so there is an element of how do you deal with unsolicited proposals, because any transition that you do will have deep impacts on that transition to net zero and the cost of it. So that's something that policymakers tend to have to grapple with. And there's one element which is on the positive side in terms of, if you look at countries in the Pacific, a lot of them are countries with very large economic zones. A country like the FSM or RMI will probably have 1 million square kilometers of EEZ. They've had some interesting models around monetizing that, particularly with fisheries. And so there is also this interest about what's happening in the region. You're seeing hydrogen flows happening from Chile to East Asia. You're seeing similarly flows that will happen from Australia to North Asia. And therefore, are these countries at the crossroads? Can they benefit from this? Are they just off-takers? Can they actually be suppliers? I think those are the questions that people are trying to deal with in some of these countries, these small island countries. From ADB's operations in other parts, particularly we're dealing with the gigawatt scale solar parks in Rajasthan, which happened a few years ago. I would think there are 2 or 3 factors that are important. One is in terms of setting the vision right, getting the resource assessments right, looking at whether the country has an ability to sustainably supply. And when I say sustainable, it's not just about the clean energy itself, but whether there's a competitive advantage that you'd have in terms of can you produce and re-export, at a price that makes sense, as well as how do you kind of scale this up? Are there the first interventions that would need more of public sector support? And how do you kind of loop the private sector in to come in and scale this up? I think those are going to be important elements of this transition. Thanks.
Thank you, Len. The financial people are always thinking in a very systematic way. So what works at the gigawatt level should also work at a very small scale level. I will come back to you afterwards on the development partners role, which will be probably kind of a teasing for my second question. Len, thank you for that. John, I'm turning towards you. So John Fulton is the Chief Operating Officer from Ocean Assets. You have a background of 35 years in corporate banking, risk management and project financing. You also teach for the last 10 years business courses in universities like Madrid and Geneva, many things like strategy, entrepreneurship, multicultural management, business development. And you are now applying this very rich background to develop SME Blue Impact initiative to drive private capital to SMEs in the blue economy. I believe you call this the missing link to the SMEs. So maybe you can explain to us exactly what this initiative on blue is, on blue SMEs, and how you manage to drive them towards gaining access to finance. I think you have a small presentation, John, that you would like us to run. We'll give you the mic.
Thank you very much, Gila, and thank you to ADB, IMT-GT, and MARES, or NLA International, for inviting me to join this panel. It's a privilege. First, I will answer the question of what is our mission. We are called Blue Impact, and actually it's before this, so keep that slide there, don't move it yet. That we are an initiative that was first announced by ADB at their January 27th, 2022, as a potential new initiative to drive financing to the blue SME world in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands. A report was issued this is a joint initiative by ADB, UNDP, and UNEP. So it's very important that you have these developmental organizations working from the top down, and that our initiative is essentially working from the bottom up. So all the projects in the room, would you please give me your cards? I'd be happy to work with you in some capacity. What is our mission? Our mission is to scale impact, okay? What is our tool? Our tool is finance. Our target audience, we are working with investors because, let's be real, we have to figure out what do the investors want. We're talking private capital. I'm not talking public capital here. I'm talking how to get the private capital down to the ground, to the actual projects. And then the other half of the equation are the SMEs. There are 2 types of SMEs in our universe. One is existing SMEs, and this includes renewables, but it goes across the entire spectrum of blue economy sectors. And it also includes working with a lot of accelerators, because the blue economy is an innovative space in itself. So we have to work with accelerators as they identify, bring along new technologies, new things, to actually apply them. Well, they've already gone through their acceleration process, so we take them from there and try to match them with the funders. We don't try to compete with the accelerators, we complete. So wherever they are taking their activity to, we try to step in and bring the private investors to them. Our sweet spot, and this is out of a report that was the report I mentioned before, identified, in fact, I'll give you the name of the report, but I keep getting it wrong, so I'll read it. It is called Financing the Blue Economy Investments in Sustainable Blue SMEs. It was published by, it's both on the website of ADB and it's on the website of UNDP and UNEP. So you can go find that. And there's another report I recommend that you read called The Rising Tide, put out by UNEP, and Turning the Tide, which is specific to sectors, telling you what are the criteria you should look at and what are some of the solutions and metrics and standards to look at. It's super rich. I mean, there's a ton of information. So sorry, I'm getting off the track. So what is our role? We're trying to figure out what do investors want. So here we have the slide, I try to take complicated situations and make them simple. So we have 5 basic areas that investors focus on. One is geography. The other one is what is the level of economic development? What is the impact investing? What is the impact? What is the sector and what is the ticket size? Most investors do not really want to go below 10 million. In fact, in reality, they don't want to go below 20. So we have to combine all these realities. And the third point, impact investing, is there's a trade-off between impact and return. You will find many investors across the space talk about impact investing, but they're actually heavily impact, slow on return, high on return, low on impact. So you have to understand who your investors are. And then what size they want to invest in. Do they want asset heavy or asset light? This is a term you'll hear all the time. A lot of CapEx or not. Old versus new technology. TRL level, it was mentioned this morning. We work at TRL level 7 and above. High versus slow growth. Catalytic and patient. Those are 2 words I haven't heard today. I think I heard catalytic once. But there are different types of money out there, and each type of money is looking for different type of investments. So then I get back to the investor side of the formula. You have impact funds, private equity, venture capital, wealth managers, family offices, foundation, business angels, friends, family, and fools, development finance institutions, insurance companies, and pension funds. Next slide, please. So what are we focusing on? We're focusing on Asia Pacific. We're focusing on emerging markets. We've primary impact, ticket size 100,000 to 10 million, all sectors, SMEs, asset light or asset heavy, old versus new, TRL 7 and above, high versus slow, all. But we have to find the investors that are willing to do catalytic and patient funding. Because one of the things that was clear this morning is that the financial calculations don't work in this space. I think it was Dr. Key who mentioned the NPV, the higher the interest rate, the quicker the return required by the markets. So in this space, it doesn't work because we're talking about returns that are 10, 20, 30. And another point is what we value is not necessarily what has value in the markets. So, sorry. So then the last point is level of risk. What level of risk are the different investors? So our universe tends to be family offices, foundations, business angels, friends, family, and fools are the first ones, as all the entrepreneurs in this room know, are their main funders. DFIs are not there to finance development finance institutions. They're there to do government to government, some catalytic funding. Insurance companies, ORA, Ocean Risk Resilience, Action Alliance is super important in this space. It's all about collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. Next slide, please. And so specifically for SMEs and renewables, SMEs have a role to support the big projects, okay? Be it wind, hydrogen, solar. Scaling new technologies. the pilots. We have some pilots in the room here. Access to off-grid energy is super important for remote and island communities. We've heard that a lot today. But when you have islands, you have land scarcity. So what are you looking at? You have to look at your natural resources. Is that you have good wind, you have good waves, you have land. What is the appropriate combination? And also, there is a money-making opportunity here, because where you have any of these offshore devices, you can actually create data. You have to realize every sensor is a data gathering opportunity. And data can be sold. If you listen to anybody in finance, they say, oh, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough data. Okay, guys, the story's over, data's coming in, no more excuses. So you can sell that data to somebody who will use that data. And also some of the natural markets, carbon credits we talked about this morning, are super important. It's still nascent, it's in development, but this is where a lot of projects can actually generate revenue, which will then, of course, lead to a bankable transaction. But public-private partnerships are essential to assure long-term viability for private investment. So we need the regulations, you need the incentives, you need subsidies, you need tax relief, and risk sharing. So whenever you do a financing now in this space, very often you need catalytic financing, which means you need somebody who will be willing to step in, and this is where ADB on a scale will step in and do first loss, coastal event, insurance policies. Anybody in the insurance world can be very useful for the earlier levels of risk. So if you can de-risk as much as possible using these organizations, your transactions then become more bankable. But then we have to reach scale. Sorry, I've gone on too long. Bye.
That's very insightful. Thank you very much, Joan. I think you used the word nascent, and that's all it is actually. Blue is a new avenue. It's a new venture for everyone. We even have difficulties to define blue. What is blue exactly? We all the more have difficulties to define sustainable blue, and we are just in the middle of defining that. But thank you for lining up all the criteria that could be of interest for SMEs. You talked about IRR. Obviously, when it comes to blue project, economic rate of return should be also considered. And I pick up some of the presentation of Pa Andreas before. I strongly believe, with the Indonesian example, that a strong and very pushy, I would say, optimistic regulatory framework for the public authorities is necessary for SMEs to thrive into this blue, this blue environment. Otherwise, non-revenue generating SMEs, some of you are non-revenue generating at this stage, will not be able to see the light. And this is probably where us, DP, development partners, and financial institutions should play a role. On that note, I'm turning to Michael. Michael Detlefsen, so you're Chief of the Division of Innovative Finance and International Financial Institution, Directorate of SDG, Innovation and Economic Transformation. This is a very long title, but you're working at UNIDO, sorry. We brought upon UNIDO a little bit earlier. I believe that you have a slide deck also to run. Maybe you want to go through it. We would like to know from you how you help those SMEs in terms of technical assistance, to fill the gap, to become bankable, to become implementable in terms of projects, and to unlock, basically, this financial flow that just ask for flowing into this blue economy, and not specifically on ocean energy, but all the sustainable blue economy as a whole. And I would like you maybe to focus on the three instruments that you are promoting: a guarantee instrument, an impact investment fund, and also what you called your green power financing facility. The floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you, Gisela. Thank you very much to the organizers, the co-organizers, for inviting UNIDO to this highly interesting event. I must say, personally, I did know very little about the blue economy, so I have learned quite a bit today. I thank you to all the colleagues for their presentations. It has been extremely informative, and I'm certain there will be the one or the other program or project opportunity that we at UNIDO, which stands for United Nations Industrial Development Organization, will be quite happy to pursue further in the future. I have a few slides, if I may present them briefly. I will try to keep them very crisp and to the point, but I think it is important for the audience to understand a bit about what UNIDO is doing, where we are present, our scope of activities, and then I will basically round off with answering some of the questions posed by the moderator. So we are a comparatively small specialized agency of the UN family. We are based in Vienna, Austria. We have, however, a large presence in terms of networks all around the globe in terms of, for example, national cleaner production centers, or sustainable energy centers, or investment promotion and technology promotion offices scattered around the globe. And our focus as the only UN agency is industry. We are focusing on industry, and I should say with the second last Director General, Mr. Li Yong from China, we have basically we are defining industry as an inclusive and sustainable industrial development. So we are trying to accommodate the themes of today in terms of sustainability or supporting regenerative projects, and not necessarily supporting, let's say, brown or black technologies. We are a all-encompassing agency in terms of providing support both in the field of technical cooperation, policy analysis, norms, standards, and convening and partnerships. We have today 171 member states. We just had our latest addition, and I'm quite happy to see a few representatives from Palau here today, because Palau is our latest newcomer as member state, so a warm welcome also from my side here. UNIDO focuses and actually owns or is the custodian of SDG 9 on infrastructure, promoting innovation and inclusive and sustainable industrialization. And of course, we are also supporting SDG 14, which is clearly the theme of today's session on life below water, and of course, SDG 9. Next slide, please. We understand ourselves as an honest broker. We are trying to bring credibility to the work we do, and which, of course, in the past has been primarily focusing on technical assistance. With the new division that I am pleased to head, Division of Innovative Finance and International Financial Institutions, UNIDO is actually extending its outreach to also engage more with IFIs, specifically, of course, the Asian Development Bank, but also the other regional banks and DFIs. And we have, to date, been not very good in actually turning these political engagements into clear, measurable outputs. So just give you an example. Over the last 10 years, we have signed more than 70 plus MOUs and joint declarations with international finance institutions, and there's been very little money flowing out of these MOUs. And that's, I think, the expectation of my new Director General, who is a former Minister of Development from Germany, is to change this, to really engage with ADB and the other IFIs, and of course also local financial institutions, impact investors, to see how we can actually scale up and develop more impactful programs and projects. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of green hydrogen was a big theme here in today's sessions. what we are trying to do is to use our convening power, our policy outreach, our training and knowledge side of competencies to bring to the table to help advance on some of the global themes. We are here joining up with the World Bank on operationalizing one of the action items from COP26 in Glasgow, on how to go about globally to develop and mature green hydrogen-related projects, and see how we can advance some of these in the developing countries. Today, the vast majority of green hydrogen projects are, of course, all being sourced in developed countries. Next slide. I'm just finishing off with a few slides on what are the possible collaborative engagements that we have sort of mapped out together with international financial institutions. The left-hand side, grant donors, technical assistance, government agencies is basically our traditional pillar. We are an implementing partner with a number of multilateral agreements and conventions that can provide funding to environmental programs and projects. The Global Environment Facility, also the Green Climate Fund, the Montreal Protocol, where we are the leading implementing agency for the last 22 years. And we are now trying to, and that's my job, to see how we can bring in more the local banks, the local financial institutions to actually scale up and develop jointly and collaboratively more impactful projects and programs. Next slide. Okay, this is another example of how this could look like by bringing in, again, our traditional donors together with IFIs, DFIs, and private donors, philanthropic foundations. I learned a new term today, 3 times F, the fools. Yeah, okay, I didn't. That's a new one. So again, trying to bring in all stakeholders to the table and jointly program much more impactful projects. As the audience certainly knows, the amount of ODA funding is by short not sufficient to keep to have the capacity to really make 2030 and decarbonization objectives to keep the deadlines. So we are dependent on private sector funds, and this is an excellent audience to discuss these points. I think that's the last slide. In terms of, no, sorry, this is the last one. We have at the moment a pilot project with the Green Climate Fund, which is heavily supported by the heads of both our agencies, the head of Green Climate Fund and our own Director General, Gerd Müller. What we are doing here is to bring climate adaptation and mitigation aspects into our programming for an agribusiness project in South Africa, where we are combining a TA facility, which will be funded by the GCF together with an impact fund facility that goes in parallel. So basically trying to ensure that the SME companies that will be benefiting out of the TA facility will be elevated to become bankable potential investee companies for the impact investor to go in and provide either equity or debt capital. And this is unique. This is the first of its kind supported by the GCF. And we see quite a bit of value addition that we can provide, not even on the TA component, but even on the impact fund component, because the investors can benefit from, let's say, the credible, the independent, non-biased support of a UN agency. And probably that model could be replicated also in the field of blue economy. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. As you can see, you have a large spectrum of financial solutions, and I really encourage you to try and speak to our speakers to see whether their financial solutions could also connect with your needs. Let me turn to Alex Burrell. She is a principal investment specialist within what we call in ADB Private Sector Operation Department. You've been in ADB for 7 years, Alex, but before that you had a career of investment banker in the Citibank, JP Morgan, BNP Paribas. You have worked in the financing and the financial advisory role in many sectors like energy, water, oil and gas, and mining sectors prior to joining ADB. So I will ask you a very simple question, Alex, or two questions, if I may. How should a developer approach investors at that development stage? At what development stage, at what preparedness status, with what kind of support should an investor approach should a developer approach investors? What are the pre-requirements from our perspective, ADB? And second, how can we, ADB, the Multilateral Development Bank in Asia, the Climate Bank, and the private sector team help mobilize financing for smaller projects in a very concrete way? There is money here, and there are needs there. How do we reconcile those two aspects? Thank you, Alex, for your insights.
Thank you. That's about 4 questions. Where am I going to start? Okay. So I think what I learned from the workshop yesterday is very clear that there is a gap. There's lots of money available for financing. And there are projects here, if I can steal the words of Nick Lambert, the ocean technologies exist, they're investable, and they're scalable. So why is there a gap? You know, there is a gap because the engineers and the scuba divers and the other great minds who put these projects together actually are good at building the projects, but lenders speak and investors speak a different language. So let's split that between equity investment and lending. So equity investors are optimists. They look at the upside. They think if it's going to be successful and scalable, it's going to be profitable, and they're going to get a return. Lenders, on the other hand, are pessimists. What we think is, how do we get our money back? How do we not lose our shirts? And how do we get our small margin back? So we're the pessimists. So the first thing that needs to be addressed is get your equity, and then start talking about debt. Lenders don't lend money to people that don't have any money, if you've ever been to a bank and tried to get a mortgage. So you need to have your equity first. Now, the gap needs to be bridged with possibly a financial advisor or possibly some assistance through ADB to mobilize that financing and to make those introductions to the family offices, to the impact funds, etc. But what needs to happen first is that a business plan has to be developed. You've got to have a revenue stream. So the first question is, what's a revenue stream? How will your equity investors start to make money? And then how will you convince lenders to gear up that business, to then make it scalable? And the next question, so that's something that ADB can play a role in to help our shortlisted MARES projects. And the second part of it is, well, what does private sector department do in ADB? Well, it actually takes as much time to do a project, in many cases, that is $50 million, as it does to do a project that takes $5 million. And in some cases, the projects that are $50 million or $100 million are a little bit easier because those developers have a long experience of raising equity, raising debt, scalability, because they're already big companies. But what we need to be doing now is thinking about how we're going to do these smaller projects of $5 million, And we need to do that through a 180B model. So take, for example, a renewable energy project with some additionality. What the lenders want is to say, here is your power purchase agreement, and here is your revenue stream. That will repay your debt. And we will take some money from the sovereign team and combine it to put on those additional projects that we talk about, which is aquaculture, and other projects, building back reefs, etc. And that is how we have to mobilize things moving forward. Commercial lenders don't like new technology. And that's where ADB plays a catalytic role in driving the process. We do the pilot project, and once there's proof in the pudding and it becomes scalable, then the commercial lenders will come in because they've seen it work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. This is really too short, but let me turn to Vincent. Vincent Choi is our Asia representative from Delphos. Delphos is a leading institution in market transaction, advisory, and investments, also risk management, and it's consulting services addressed to government and private sector across multiple industries. I think the motto is social and environmental impact finance. You are doing a lot of fundraising, Vincent, in the region. Maybe we would like to hear from us to locate you. You are not a development partner like ADB. You are not an equity fund. You are in between. You are facilitating the life of SMEs to get money out from us or from us. How do you do that? Can you give us some good example or illustration of how you do make this happen? And can you give the audience some good advice and a recommendation?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the organizers and the co-organizer for inviting me here. And thank you, Steve, for making me an alternative speaker. So here I am as an alternative. I'm here representing Delphos. We are a capital advisory company based out of Washington. We typically fundraise for projects between 30 million to 400 million, so that's our sweet spot. Our largest project that we've done is about 1.5 billion. But prior to joining Delphos, I'm an entrepreneur. So I spent 20, 30 years as an entrepreneur, and the one job of an entrepreneur is to fundraise. So I've been fundraising for the longest time possible, right? So just a show of hand here. How many people here are projects looking for funding? Fantastic. How many of you think that it's very easy to fundraise? One, fantastic, I need to talk to you later. How many here in the room are people who like to give out money? Who like to give out money? Who's into funding? Who's to funding projects? Okay, the first guys who raise their hands, please talk to these folks later. They are the people you want to talk to. How many of you who have raised their hands just and who's like to give out funding have ever gotten into a situation where some guy comes into a room, opens up his deck, and then you say, oh, wow, I'm going to invest in this straight away? Anybody? No. And as John mentioned very, very quickly just now, there are all sorts of funders all over the world for all sorts of projects, right? How many of those projects looking for funding has only one deck? Anybody? Don't dare to put up your hand now. So we exist basically to bridge what funders want, all sorts of funding sources want, and what the projects need, funding. Because there are so many ways in which you can think about fundraising and monetization and all the projects you have, all these beautiful projects that you have. How do you monetize that? How do you communicate it into the way that that particular funder wants? No, for my own personal companies, is insane. For one fundraising exercise, I could have 18 decks catering to 18 different type of funders, really depending on who I'm pitching to at one point. The first thing when you go into a funding meeting is you ask the questions first, because you need to know what he wants in the first 2 seconds of the pitch before you bring out the right pitch to talk to that person, right? And you're right. Equity people are optimists, and then there's pessimists, and then there's those people who don't even want to listen to you, and they're doing their job, so-called, listening to a pitch. You need to identify, you need to know who you're talking to. How much of your pitch do you spend actually talking to the person that is going to fund you? Because you need to understand who this person is first before you even bring out your pitch deck. And that first 2 minutes is so critical. How many pitch decks do you have for your project? So we work with projects to really look at what they have. How do you recreate monetization models? How do you recreate fundraising models in order to, help them raise money, help them raise funding? Let me give you a very good example of a project I worked on. Right. It's an agriculture project. They want to raise some funding for agriculture to get into an MVP stage to make sure that people understand, so that they can then approach financiers for banking. And we created the most innovative funding mechanism. It's called crowdfunding. How many of you heard of crowdfunding? Yeah, right. So how many of you have done crowdfunding for a project? I mean, Scott is an expert there, so I'm not going to embarrass myself. But hey, we created a game where people buy pigs to put into a farm and farm them, and then all that money goes into buying pigs, and when those pigs grow up, those pigs are sold, and the money is returned to whoever is gaming. So anyone who is playing that game can farm, right? And this project is in Bacolod. It's in the Philippines. It's raised quite a bit of capital. The farm is running very well now, and they don't need funding anymore because so many people is playing the game that they decided they do not need to borrow money. Right, so these are there's so many ways to look at funding. I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, we've spent 20, 30 years really trying to raise funding. We have to be very creative. And we have to recognize, the panel has been brilliant today, different funders want different things. But we, as project owners, keep speaking one language with one deck, hoping that they hear what we want, and then fund us. And really, that's a shot in the dark. That's praying that right time, right opportunity, right guy is listening to you at that one time. So I think that's what I want to say with regards to fundraising. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. I will go to conclusive remarks for each of you, because again, I'm very conscious of the time. I really believe this is too short a session, and I really believe you have to come to our speakers afterwards to not to offer them a drink, but you can, but specifically to ask them questions regarding their financial solutions. I will. There's no beer outside. I don't think so. That I refer to the organization for that. I will ask you one very simple question. You have seen that there is a spectrum of financial solutions, but there are conditions to access those. There are standards and requirements. Blue projects are not easily palatable for animals like us, because we don't know blue projects very well, as we did not know a green project 10 years ago. Lessons learned after 10 years, we know how to approach green projects, and we know how to assess them, we know how to make them bankable and implementable. We don't know for blue yet, let alone for specifically small-scale SMEs in blue sectors. So one question for each of you, and starting with you, Len. And coming back to renewable ocean energy, what is the biggest challenge that you see for SME to grow and scale up, and what is the best way to overcome this? From our perspective, so one big challenge from a renewable ocean energy SME to grow and scale up, and the best way that we could advise to overcome it. Len, floor is yours.
Thanks for that. I'll go back to what I initially brought up, in the sense that when you're working in small island countries, oftentimes there will be a plan in terms of how they see the energy sector unfold over the next 10 or 15 years. And then you get multiple, unsolicited options in terms of well, we have, this is the perfect solution for your island problem. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in countries where they have a lot of these options coming up to them is, how do you evaluate this? How do you understand whether this is the right fit? Is it a scalable solution? What, if not this, what else? So I think policymakers, regulators, there tends to be a certain element of paralysis that comes in when you have too many options. And therefore, being able to discern and sift through that, often, they come in and talk to development agencies and others to help assess whether this is something that has been tried out elsewhere. Are there running pilots? What's been the experience? I think being able to have that, credibility on the technology readiness levels, demonstration in very remote places. Sometimes it takes 3 days to get there. Putting up an asset where you're not able to maintain it, without having a physical presence on the ground. I think all of those are factors that go in, and being able to have something robust is going to be a factor that goes into decision making.
Thank you, Len. We bankers like the word robust. It makes us comfortable. John, on your turn, one big challenge, from an SME's perspective, you have worked many years in the environment of SMEs. One big challenge to grow and to scale up in ocean renewable energy world, and how to overcome that.
Well, I think many people think of scaling as that one company scaling up. And another approach is that you look for role models in different environments that can be transferred within the same geographical space across regions or across the world. So it's very important to be flexible on different ways that you can possibly scale to reach impact. Because remember, we're here to reach impact. We're trying to save the planet, and sooner rather than later. So we always have to get that lens into the minds of existing companies, whether they're big or small. You may have a fisher folk, but their impact is so much. But when you have 1,000 fisher folks, and if you can get them to change the way they do business, that's scaling. In my mind, it's not just financial, it's also the impact.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Michael, your turn. We know that the UN has a lot of clout, can access to many regulatory framework and push forward some reforms. You presented a lot of technical assistance solutions. Same question, from your perspective, but focusing on renewable ocean energy. What the biggest challenge, and how to overcome it?
No, thank you for the question. I think what I sort of took from this morning's session was that in terms of providing assistance to many SMEs or individuals who go along with one profession for all their life, and probably even the previous generations. It appears to be also an issue about a skill set of conveying perhaps the need to acquire new competencies, new capabilities, new qualifications, with a view to change also professions along the way. If you really want to make the blue economy happen, I think it requires also a repositioning of some of the SMEs that will be affected, either as being supporting industries or as being the main beneficiaries of some interventions. And here I would like to highlight that UNIDO has a very strong track record in what is coined cluster approaches, multi-stakeholder approaches, convening of stakeholders in organized sessions, involving local municipalities, local governments, policymakers, the business community alike to sit at the table and organize so-called expert group meetings where we are inviting and identifying the best way forward, and then of course also leaning towards what Johan said in terms of scaling up, because we are at any point in time managing between 800 and 1,500 projects, and we do not have the capacity to have more projects. So we need to look into how we can perhaps replicate the model from one municipality to another one. So that would be my sort of proposed approach. And again, there, of course, the aspect of finance would be put forward on the table, perhaps where we can provide assistance in identifying impact investors. I'm sure I have someone I need to talk to afterwards, but also to reach out to our existing conventional donors to see if there would be the one or the other donor who would be happy to fund this. And again, the storyline needs to be adapted to the specifics of the investor. Yeah, I fully agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. For one full day with us, I think you would have picked some key words to put in your pitch. It helps to move forward some proposal to development bankers and financial institutions when some words are being presented in your presentation. Because we are very familiar with some concept, and we like also to market and sell internally projects which have exactly the features that we intend to see. Alex, your turn. You said you have a pessimistic approach. You need to have that for risk management perspective, obviously. But here, maybe can you tell us, once you have identified this very specific, because with your long experience in private sector operation, and more specifically on energy, one very, very important challenge you see and how you would recommend to overcome it?
Well, it's not being a pessimist, but equity has upside, and if you lend money, you always look at risks to understand how you get your money back. So that is for all lenders. So I'm not a pessimist. I think these projects are really exciting, and I really appreciate what you said, Vincent. It was really important to say that you need a business plan and you need to pitch correctly to equity investors and to lenders. And they're different. You don't share the same pitch. You don't talk about all the upside when you're pitching to a lender. Once you have your equity, then you can talk about, the debt and why the economics are robust to move the project forward. So I think the business plan is very important. We have done incredibly small projects in the private sector team. We've worked successfully with the sovereign team. We did this in Tonga. It's for a solar power project, but then they got hit by a volcanic eruption, which is a tragedy, but it's on its way back on its feet. But we do combine our sovereign resources together with our private sector resources to make difficult projects work.
Thank you, Alex. Don't get me wrong. Pessimistic is something that is running into our veins. Bankers, we have to see the world in a very risk management perspective. So it's not pessimistic; it's realistic, but with some, position which is at the beginning. Maybe we have to be sold the project. I'm finishing with you, Vincent. You have done a lot of deals. You have done a lot of transactions successfully. What would you say is a major challenge that the audience here need to overcome, and how to avoid those?
I think one of the things that all project owners should really do and sit down and do, if you're not the right person to hire someone, is to figure out all the ways you can make money, right? Don't be afraid of making money. Sometimes, that's like a bad word, Don't be afraid of making. How does your project actually make money? Let me give another live example, right? We were trying to do a modernization program for a fleet. and there's no public transportation fleet. And the numbers just don't work. The public transportation number fee that you can charge is capped. But once we take a look at, hey, can I wrap this public transport in advertising? And suddenly, we can make 3 times more money than what we can do on fares. Suddenly, this whole project is bankable, right? So have you actually considered all the ways your project can actually make money, right? Have you thought out of the box? You know, you are doing this, you're doing public transportation, yes, you're doing fares, but how about advertising? How about data sales? Can you slap a sensor on your bus and then it starts recording data, and that data can then be sold to Google, and they do Google Maps or for self-driving cars to identify lanes between one another? Have you considered that data sale as another revenue stream? See, so I think the word of really the challenge is identify your revenue streams. You know, think outside the box, break it down, and you'll be surprised. There are many projects that might not be bankable, suddenly bankable. Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, right. First-hand entrepreneur.
Thank you very much. I really need to wrap up this session, but with regret. I would say 2 things. We all know, and specifically in Southeast Asia, that the state budget could not provide all the financing for blue economy. We all know that. Even ODA, development assistance, could provide, but it's not enough. Private sector, the key is critical. We know that, and we will support that. We are not here to rebuke proposals, not at all. We are here to accept proposals when they are acceptable to us and to a way of working. So you have here some financial solutions which have been presented to you. There are many others. As you understood, we are amenable to specific words, specific way of thinking, where we can see not only IRR, but also, you know, how the investment could impact on livelihood, community livelihood. This is very important when it comes to sustainable fisheries, for example. That is something that obviously is in your mind and has to be in ours. I would like to finish in saying that ADB with MARES. MARES is a very good illustration of how ADB could support and scale up SMEs like yours. You will always have our support, and please use this springboard, the equivalent of TMRS, to do this leapfrog that will enable you to move forward and scale up. Thank you very much today for your attention, and I would like you to give an applause for this very fantastic array of panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, panel, and Guylaine for your moderation on this final event of the day. So, folks, it has been a day of fairly broad coverage, many perspectives, many ideas, many really interesting comments and contributions. To summarize that coverage, let me invite to the stage Steve Peters of the ADB.
Thank you, everyone. I'll try to be brief, but those of you who know me know that that will be a bit difficult. I'd first of all like to thank the people who helped make this happen. Obviously, ADB committed some funds to make this happen, and the Clean Energy Financing Partnership supported this. And I'd also like to thank our partners, including our great friends at CMIT, Ferdas, who's taught me how to be a diplomat. It's been very difficult for him. And our friends from the governments in Palau and RMI, and of course the Economic Planning Unit of Malaysia, who've been so tremendously supportive. Really appreciate it. We've got a lot of great speakers today because of the influence of the ADB and for these organisations. And I thank you all for coming. I know a lot of you have come from a very long way away. Before I kick on and talk about the TA, I want to just throw a few words at you. I was making some notes. So, scalable, regenerative, education, awareness, cluster approach, big, small, or big and small, pitching to investors with multiple decks, planning but also economic models, capability development for government and for SMEs, and sophistication. And my friend Vincent Joy, who I'm sorry you were the alternative speaker, and you are my great friend, I'm terribly sorry, thinking about new ways to make money, thinking about not only innovation and technology and business model, but be a bit greedy. Greedy's good. I sound like Gordon Gekko, don't I? But it is, we need to think differently, because the definition of stupidity is doing the same thing multiple times and expecting the same result. Well, this TA and these 8 projects that we've presented show that it's already being done. We have different pathways to beat climate change, to get off fossil fuels, to regenerate the environment, to sequester carbon, to reduce pollution. These are all things that we want to do, right? So, as Nick said, the future is here already, it's just not evenly distributed. He was quoting, I can't remember who the author was, I think Gibson was the author. But if you look at the work we've done at MARES thus far, we've had a team of really capable people, led by Rear Admiral Nick Lambert, retired Royal Navy, who I am delighted to have the opportunity to work with. We've had a team of very strong individual consultants, including Scott and Mike, who presented today. And before he leaves the room, because he's walking outside, I'd like to recognise Dan Millison, who's the intellectual author behind MARES. And MARES came about because of a conversation in the Marshall Islands and then a conversation in my office with Dan. And Dan has a deep and abiding love of the ocean. I'm not a diver, I'm not a sailor. Dan's a diver and he loves the ocean. I think we can love the ocean a bit more and we can make a bit of money out of it and we can put a lot more back into it than we take out. So I just wanted to recap what we've done. We've done 2 years of research. We've got 2 400-page business planning models in preparation for Marshall Islands and Palau. We need to do some field work on the ground to finish that off, to look at economic and planning models, which are obviously something that's come out of this event. We also need to look at providing some commentary on how we can provide to do more work on pathways for financing, and whether that's through Ghislaine at the Blue ASEAN Hub, financing hub, or whether it's through other ADB activities or through other activities with our friends at UNIDO, World Bank, or wherever else. Because if we want to beat climate change, we've got to do it all together. So I'd also like to recap that we've done a fantastic resource site at the ADB data room. I'm not sure if Feli can bring it up, but if you look up ADB Marine Renewable Energy, you'll see that's the one. You'll see a data room, and if Feli could just scroll up, you can see a photo of Nick. A bit further more, all of the proceedings will be under the webinars, under the webinars tab there. All of the proceedings from today will be under the webinars tab. Under the project examples, every one of these projects will be there with the contact information for the people who are the principals, and I urge you not only to contact them, but to tell your friends and show people that these are investment opportunities that are available now and that they are also happening now. Over half the people who've taken part in this presentation are not startups, they're mature businesses. They've been doing it for 10 years. So, to recap, we've got a data room, we've got a handbook that we're finalising, we've got some more work to do on the ground and doing planning and economic models, but MARES has been a very interesting journey, and today's been great because we've learnt a lot. I had a chat to Irene and she scolded me at the break, and she said, "Oh, you know, what's in this for us?" And it's true. I've learnt more than I think you guys have actually learnt from us, because we've learnt a lot about what you think, what your expectations are. We've also had the great opportunity to have small investors, large investors, DFIs, international finance organisations, government, technologists, and community leaders in the room having a conversation between 150 people. This is quite an unusual event, and I really thank you for your participation, and I thank you for making time. Now, where do we go from here? Well, on that note, I'm going to hand over to my boss, Dr. Priyanka Wijaya-Tunga, who's the Head of Energy at the Asian Development Bank, and Priyantha's going to tell us, do some closing remarks, but he's also going to tell us what ADB is going to do. Thanks, Priyantha.
Distinguished invitees, the resource persons, and my colleagues, I don't think I have a lot to say because he has already summarized and almost done the closing remarks. But it's a great session. I am sure all of you agree with me that we have had a fantastic session. In fact, with many thought-provoking interventions covering many sectors. The title itself of the TA title itself speaks for that. That is marine, aquaculture, reefs, renewable energy, ecotourism, ecosystem services, among others, of course, surrounding new ocean energy economy. Steve already picked up some of the phrases which were used during the session. I picked up a few others. Fortunately, there was no overlap. So let me pick up the ones which I picked up and then extract, use, and dispose, replace with regeneration, circular multifunction. No sustain, but regenerate. Small island nations are large ocean nations. It is not a boundary between land and the ocean, but an interface. It is just one ocean covering the whole globe, not many. Action is attraction. Collective action, country strategy, long-term view, inclusive, backward and forward linkages in the blue economy. Obviously, from the last session, combining sovereign and non-sovereign, a good business plan. And finally, the future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed. For me, I think that summarizes, along with, of course, the rest of it, the three plenary sessions we had, the overall forum. The subject of today's forum touched all few energy policy principles. We had the energy policy, as Steve said at the beginning, 2021 energy policy just a couple of years ago, rather 1.5 years ago, we got it approved. And it has 5 principles, and all 5 principles are embedded in this project, and it was mentioned in this forum. That is the principles. In fact, I clubbed them together in a single sentence. That is providing clean, reliable, and affordable energy access to our peoples in our DMCs under well-invested, resilient energy sectors, following good governance, where knowledge, cross-sector approaches, and regional integration play an important role. Hopefully, I captured all the 5 principles. ADB, Asia Pacific's region's climate bank, is currently going through a reorg, focusing strongly on providing solutions to our member countries rather than projects. So we are now in the reorg. The main objective is to focus on the solutions rather than investing in projects. Of course, eventually it ends up with projects, but focusing on solutions to start with. The whole energy community will work as a single group, and operations of all sectors will come under one department. That's going to be very interesting because this department is almost half of the bank. Like, it's huge. And all sectors come under that department, and each division, the whole of energy sector group comes under one umbrella, as well as, of course, transport, urban, and other sectors also. And also, we'll have very strong interaction with our private sector and PPP operations. This means the ideas, innovation, knowledge solutions we discussed throughout the day hopefully will find their way to our member countries more effectively. So, because it all comes under one department. I am glad to assure you that our energy team will make best efforts to take what we deliberated today to the next stage, as Steve very rightly pointed out, for the benefit of all our member countries. But please keep in mind, you are part of it. You are one of those stakeholders. You will be an integral part of that exercise. With these few thoughts, on behalf of ADB and my colleagues, I thank you all, the distinguished resource persons and participants, for joining the forum and contributing with your knowledge and experience which we value immensely. On my part, I really appreciate the efforts of Steve and his team, including the consultants. Of course, Steve is backed by very good consultants here, and Dr. Nam, my colleague, my small team which supports all this, Dr. Nam and other donor and other colleagues for their enormous efforts in finally making this great event happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Priyantha. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap. Thank you so much for being here. Just one more time, show your appreciation for the ADB, the IMT-GT, all the people that made this happen and put together today's day. Great stuff. Just one final request before you leave the room, folks. The organizers would like you to gather on that side of the room so that we can take a group photo. If you wouldn't, just indulge us for a moment. Face the stage. The photographer will be up here so we can get the entire group of you in there. I know it sounds a bit odd, but that's... Oh, the center. Okay, in the center then. Just please gather together for a swift one. And then you can be off. Everyone's a bit hesitant. Don't worry, it's not going to be used for any kind of blackmail purposes. It's... Yeah, just stand behind the red seats there. Closer together, please. Closer together. Come on in. A little bit of herding required. So, the sheepdogs at the back just herd the stragglers into a nice little group there. Fantastic. Thank you.
I'll count. 1, 2, 3. One more time. One more time. MARES. And then we have to do one regenerative. Everybody, IMT-GT symbol is a triangle. Triangle. Multifunction. Everybody clap hands. Clap hands. Thank you.